Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. This past weekend, with the official comeback of Atlanta Streets Alive, Atlanta's largest car-free festival. Past Sunday, we had the entirety of Peachtree Street from Midtown to downtown completely closed off to car traffic. It's been 4 years since we've had this event, and it was super busy and super exciting. Let's talk about it. The car-free movement is gaining a lot of traction globally. From Bogota, Colombia, to Jakarta, Indonesia, to New York, to Paris. Cities around the globe have been instituting temporary and permanent pedestrian boulevards across their cities. So what is an open street? An open street is simple, really. Really as simple as closing off a block with barricades to car traffic. And quickly, the space becomes colonized with people walking, biking, rollerblading, and you name it. Local car traffic is allowed, such as emergency vehicles, local car traffic, and deliveries, but it is made clear that they are visitors in these spaces. There's many names and forms for this type of pedestrianization, depending on the city, but one of the most prominent and successful in the US is New York's Open Streets program. As of today, they have over 160 locations and 300 city blocks pedestrianized. These streets can either be permanent or semi-permanent, or in the case of Atlanta Streets Alive, an event that happens several times a season. As a driver, this might piss you off. And I'd probably be pissed too. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as I'm sure all of us remember, we saw lots of places begin to rethink how we use our public spaces. People weren't coming to work and people didn't want to be inside. So, cities started rethinking the use of their public streets, such as outdoor dining spaces and parking spots, public gathering spaces on streets, and other uses. So since COVID, it's gotten more and more popular for cities to change the streetscapes of their cities and make them more people-oriented places. And they do this by either creating open street events or making more permanent, complete street redesigns of streets, which often includes reducing lanes, widening sidewalks, removing parking. So let's get into some of the benefits of open streets. It's important to approach the concept of open streets with an open mind, no pun intended. I know from personal experience from growing up car dependent that I probably would have fumed at the inconvenience of an event like this. I worked as an Uber Eats driver for years, and I worked Peachtree Street so often. But these kinds of events are done to make the city nicer and more enjoyable. Cars are loud and polluting and take up a ton of space. Most of our downtown spaces were built before the car, and it's quite staggering to see what the car has done to our cities in such a short amount of time. So I get it. From a driver's perspective, it seems frustrating to not have unfiltered access to everything at all times. But it's important to realize how nice something like this is for people outside of the car. One of the first major benefits is public health. According to the National Association of City Transportation Officials, in a case study done on the Open Streets initiatives, they found that, on average, people exercise 5 times longer than they would normally on a given day. Additionally, and probably the most noticeable benefit, is how much quieter a street becomes when you remove car traffic. Cars are loud and noisy, and by removing it, it's amazing how a normally busy and clogged street can become a pleasant place to be in. According to DC Open Streets, the city of Brussels reported a 10 decibel drop in noise pollution during their Open Streets event. That's significantly quieter. A second benefit, might be obvious, is environmental. Removing vehicle traffic from our streets, and from our cities in general, significantly improves the air quality in these areas. Not to mention how many more people can fit on the street, just walking and cycling. According to Open Streets DC, they saw their nitric oxide levels drop over 5 times, and their carbon monoxide levels be cut in half during their Open Streets event. Another benefit is the economic benefit. One common argument against pedestrianization is that businesses will suffer when pedestrianized, but this just simply isn't true. According to the New York City Department of Transportation, their Open Streets program increased average sales 19% above pre-pandemic averages, while nearby non-open street corridors saw their sales drop by 29% below the pre-pandemic average. That's a shocking statistic. It's gotten to the point where businesses on open streets are clamoring for open street treatment, or even worse, making the argument that open streets should be abolished citywide to make it fair for everyone, which is a bit ridiculous. Lastly, the community aspect and social benefit of pedestrianization. Humans are naturally social creatures, and it's no question that walking and being among other people is incredibly beneficial to forming connections with your neighbors and others around you. When you live in unwelcoming spaces, like more car-dependent places, and only leave the house in a car, it can be difficult to meet people and can be quite awfully isolating. It gets difficult to create genuine connections with others when you have to go out of your way. You don't have passing interactions with people. So living near or on pedestrian-friendly spaces can make a great impact on your social ability and social well-being. Open street events like Atlanta Streets Alive bring people together of all backgrounds and allows them to foster and hang out and whatever. So as expected, open street treatments such as this are often hit many political roadblocks. Politicians and business owners often fight extremely hard against these kind of projects, despite all kinds of evidence showing that pedestrianization is often very beneficial for the communities and businesses it serves. They often cite reasons such as making traffic worse, or killing business traffic, or moving parking. I will say one real issue at hand is that open streets tend to favor certain neighborhoods over certain others. According to Bloomberg City Lab, the early wave of urban adaptations during COVID-19 failed to include BIPOC, low-income, and marginalized communities, and did little to address their concerns. They found that smaller cities actually tended to have a more equitable open streets program than their larger counterparts. Open street redesigns, temporary or permanent, are often cited as a win for those that live on the route in question. But as always, there is definitely a conversation to be had on the equity of these projects. So there's actually a common argument that open streets are harmful to lower-income people, as they will often live further away and be the ones driving their cars into cities and be inconvenienced by pedestrianization and less lanes. But to me, this just doesn't make any sense. There's probably a sect of people, such as taxi drivers or delivery drivers, that are genuinely slightly inconvenienced by open streets. But usually, this type of driver would be allowed to access these streets anyways. And I would say it's probably easier for these people to make deliveries with less car traffic on the street. Additionally, most lower-income people are probably riding public transit, which has nothing to do with owning a car or driving your car into the city. That's not to put Atlanta streets alive to shame, though. The program, in my opinion, is a net good for the city, and the point is to get people talking and aware that this kind of thing is possible and is happening here in Atlanta. It's also not permanent. It only happens a few times a year during one season, and it's on a Sunday, which is least traffic-heavy day of the. But it's not all roses here either. Last year, Peachtree Center enjoyed a short time of shared space and planner-protected space, repurposed from 2 normal car lanes. But because our new mayor went weak at the knees at the first real estate complaint, the street was restored back to its 4-lane mayhem in no time. On the contrary, there are also examples of it sticking. Property owners and drivers tend to be very vocal about projects like this. In Decatur, Georgia, in 2018, the city installed traffic calming along West Howard Stone Mountain Bicycle Trail. They used colorful planners to bring the traffic lanes down to 2 lanes. The response was heinous, seeing tons of local pushback, but luckily the city government stood firm, and to this day these planners are still here, and it offers quite a nice buffer between the trail and the road. So I think it's important to note that activist events like Atlanta Streets Alive are important in normalizing the idea that streets can be changed, that we can make our cities nicer and more enjoyable to walk around in, to cycle in, to be in. Going to this event this past weekend, I was truly to myself just like, wow, this is incredibly nice. Like, you just don't see this anywhere in the city. And there's so many people around and everyone's hanging out. The street is usually a loud, chaotic mess with 4 lanes with people driving at high speeds. You never feel safe there. The movement to build complete streets in Atlanta is alive and well, but it's definitely slow going. And COVID definitely did not help that effort. We see projects such as Juniper Street take decades to happen. But with the turnout of Atlanta Streets Alive and more planned for the next few months, I would at least say there's a little bit of hope for the city. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in the concept of open streets, I would start by seeing if there's an initiative happening in your area. Many cities across the world are participating in open streets programs and implementing similar programs to tackle this idea. According to the Open Street Project, in North America alone, there are over 130 open street initiatives across North America, and more are popping up every year. I definitely recommend checking out the next Open Streets event that happens in your area, and also seeing what kind of complete streets projects are happening in your local governments. Once you start reimagining spaces in your own city, you won't look at them the same way again. For better or worse, it's definitely a curse. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe down below. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you being here. Shooting for videos every week or so I'm trying to stick with that. Thanks for checking out the channel. I hope you all have a good one. Thanks. See y'all.